right, well, thank you all so much for joining us for Great Hikes in New England for Families. Author Sarah Lamagna will discuss her brand new book, Hiking with Kids New England, 50 Great Hikes for Families. New England has a lot to offer, so it's no surprise that it's one of the top outdoor tourist destinations in the country. It sees many people traversing its land each year, and many are there specifically seeking outdoor adventure. And with families spearheading the need to get outdoors with their little ones, there are places aplenty for exploring with littles of all ages. Hiking with Kids New England offers up new and exciting adventures for parents and their elementary school-aged kids alike. So Sarah Lamagna is an ecologist turned writer and a mom to an almost 4-year-old. She was born and raised a New Englander and spent countless days out on the trails of the Northeast. Whether it's on the trails of the Green Mountains in Vermont, the high summits of the White Mountains in New Hampshire, or the coastal cliffs of Maine, Sarah is eager to show her son all of it. She is a full-time freelance writer and also volunteers as the sustainability expert for Wildkind Inc., which is a nationwide organization dedicated to getting families outside. And Sarah currently resides in Barrington, New Hampshire. I again want to thank the Friends of the Tewksbury Library, along with the libraries in Lowell, Rockport, Hopkinton, and West Newbury, for partnering with Tewksbury for tonight's event. And so for all of us watching live and those that will watch the recording on demand, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Sarah for joining us here tonight. And Sarah, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. And actually, my kid is now almost 6. So by the time I started this book, he was around that age, just about to turn 4. So yeah, it's been a very long couple of years to get this book together. So thanks so much for having me today. I'm pretty excited. My book just came out on Monday, was the official publication date, although people have been getting the book basically since May 1st. But yeah, so it's your kind of, you might have seen this if you go to Barnes and Noble or any of like outdoor stores. These Falcon guides are pretty popular. They're the black and yellow books that you see, and they have guides for all across the country. And I was lucky enough to be sort of the beginning part of these Hiking with Kids series. So this is the second book in the series, the first one, or the third, it's the third book. First one was Colorado, then Northern California, and now New England. So thanks. Let's see if my thing's gonna go. Sorry. Oh, why won't you go? There we go. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in New England. I grew up in southeastern Connecticut, and then basically when I could leave, I did leave. I went to upstate New York for college, and then went to British Columbia for my master's. But I've been adventuring around New England since I was a little kid, thanks to my mom. So that makes me adventuring for over 30 years now, almost 40. As Robert said too, I'm an ecologist turned freelance writer. So I actually have degrees in forestry, soil science, and did about 13 years working for federal government, state government, and nonprofit organizations as an ecologist. And then once I had a child, I decided I didn't want to live that life anymore and became a freelance writer, kind of cold turkey. And I specialize mostly in sustainable travel, adventure travel, slow travel, parenting in the outdoors. I do a lot of pieces about maternal mental health, specifically to using the outdoors for mental health. And then also environmental issues. I did, while I lived in Colorado for a little while, I was sort of the expert with their wildfire stuff. I was on NPR's The Takeaway as their wildfire expert. So I like to, in all of the stories that I write, I always usually relate it somewhat to the outdoors. So yeah, and then I've hiked over 400 hikes with my kid. I don't have an exact number. It's in the early 400s, but and about half of those my kid has done on his own 2 feet, and he's not yet 6. So pretty awesome. And then so a little bit about the book. So this is my first book. I actually have a second Falcon Guides book that's going to be coming out next May, and that's Swimming Holes of New England. I'm currently in the throes of researching and going and doing those hikes this year. But yeah, this is my first book. Basically, the book is not a step-by-step guide on how to hike with kids. That's really dependent on the kid, on the parent, on the family dynamic, everything. And so really it's just gives you a brief background about, the basics of hiking, and maybe, a couple of tips and tricks to going on hikes with your kid. But it's mostly the meat of it are these 50 hikes that I did with my kid across New England. So across the 6 states, I tried to spread them out as best as possible. So, I mean, I could have put in hundreds of hikes, but I really probably could have done a book for each state. But time and, just likelihood of being able to get all this done, I tried to spread it out as much as possible. So there's obviously some places that I've missed that maybe people have really wanted to have in there, but so yeah, so you'll see in the beginning, there's a big map of the 6 states, and you'll be able to see all of the different hikes and how spread out they are. And they range from pretty easy half-mile jaunts, around a lake or something, to pretty strenuous 7-mile hikes that have some serious vertical gain. So it's all sort of dependent on what you think you can do with your kid, or your grandkids, or your nieces or nephews. So yeah, like my kid in general, he's been hiking so much, he can do, even at 5.5, he can do pretty extensive hikes. So I didn't want to discount that in these books, that kids can do hard things too. So these are just like some screenshots of the book. In the beginning, it shows how to actually use the book. And before each chapter, there's a section that I call basically trail beta. So it gives you like the distance, the elevation gain, seasons that it's available to hike, those sorts of things at the beginning. So you can decide right then and there whether or not it'll be something you could do with your family. I go over basic like trail etiquette, right of way, understanding trail blazes. I go over leave no trace principles, the 10 essentials of hiking, which pretty much any hiker should know the 10 essentials of hiking, and I list those out. There's also a whole big guide right in the back of the book that has all of the 10 essentials. I talk about hiking safety, like weather and seasons, wildlife encounters, poisonous plants, ticks, because we love ticks in New England. And then the meat of the book are the actual hikes. So this is basically what a hike will look like. So for this one, this is Middle Sugarloaf Mountain, which is in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And it starts off with sort of a very quick paragraph about basically why you should go on this particular hike. That, it tells you it's got a lot of bang for your buck. It's not that far, but significant, amazing views. Mount Washington is up there. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then this blue section is the trail beta that I was talking about earlier. So it tells you everything you need to know, and then some things that you don't necessarily get on other websites like All Trails or, Outbound, or any of those other hiking websites that you go to check out trails. So I talk about, what age range it might be good for, the difficulty, average hiking time, because kids will hike slower, whether or not there's permits, if there's toilets, because we always need to know as parents whether or not there's a toilet at the trailhead or somewhere along the way. I also talk about whether or not it's like stroller or wheelchair friendly, if there's resting or nursing benches, and then like typical gear suggestions for each of the hikes. And then I go through getting to the trailhead. So I do actual directions, including GPS coordinates for the trailhead. So you can just plug those into your phone or your GPS unit in your car. And then I'll do a pretty lengthy, and by lengthy, it's maybe 500 words altogether, of the trail description of just hiking the trail. I've got a pretty sassy voice that luckily my publishers were okay with me using in this book. So I think it's pretty entertaining to read. Hopefully you find it entertaining. And then at the end, there's a miles and directions section, and this goes into heavy detail, like what you will encounter along the way on the trail. So, I mean, it gets pretty specific that, you know, hey, you cross over the Zealand River on the bridge, and then you turn right after that. You'll come to an intersection. Oh, at 0.4 miles, there's a great spot to take a small break because there's these giant boulders that the kids can play around. So that's like how detailed I got with each of the hikes, which can be really useful for parents trying to decide whether or not it'll be something that their kid could do. And then lastly, I have a trail map for each of the hikes. These are not meant to be replacements for actual topographic maps. It's always good to bring an actual map along the trail with you. It's part of the 10 essentials, but this just basically gives you an overview of what you'll see and where everything is laid out. And then lastly, I have this yellow box that, so because of my background as an ecologist, I like to put in each of the hikes something naturey, like a fact about something along the trail that you might see. So for Middle Sugarloaf in particular, there's a lichen on the trail called rock tripe that you see quite frequently on the trail. So I just did a little bit of a background as to what it is and some history about it. And so you'll find that on each of the hikes, some sort of little nature fact that you could tell your kids. You can, you know, be like the cool person who knows things. Your kid will be wowed by how smart you are. So that's basically the book, but really, how do you get started hiking with your kids? And it's not something that you can just, you know, you can go hike up Mount Washington tomorrow. It's something that takes a little bit of time and a little bit of nurturing in order to get there. My kid has not done Mount Washington yet, although we have taken the cog railway up, which is just as fun, if not better. So basically, these are sort of my 6 steps to really just starting to hike with your kids. So the first thing is you start small and you go often. And what I mean by small is literally small, short hikes, things just to get your kids outside, even just going in your backyard to get kids used to being outside and going often, even if it's something quick like after school or something on the morning on a weekend. It will get your kids used to going out on the trail without having to be out there for 8 hours. Eventually, the kids will get there. But when you're first starting out, you start small and you go often. It's also good to stay close to home at first, just so that if things go terribly wrong, it's not too far for you just to go back home, call it a wash, try again another day. I also think you definitely should give yourself and your kid a lot of patience. This can be hard some days. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking of all of the times that I've probably lost my patience with my kid multiple times on the trail. But just give yourself grace, give your kid grace. And it's okay if you need to stop your hiking and do something else. Also plan backup activities. There have been a couple of times where I've gone on a hike with my kid and he will just not be having it. It's just not something he wants to do, but I don't want him to just like give up. We're just going to go back home. No big deal. Unless it's like really terrible. But most of the time I try to come up with some sort of backup plan. Like if there's a lake nearby, maybe we just go to the lake, throw rocks in the lake or something like that, where there's just something else for him to do that's outside, that's a little bit different than just hiking up a mountain. There's also no such thing as being over prepared. I can't say this enough. There are lots of people who tend to judge, especially parents, on the trail. And you're allowed to bring everything you want. It's totally fine. If you think your kid needs something, let them bring it. If you think that you're going to need 8 diapers on the trail, bring 8 diapers. It's totally fine. It just all has to do with weight, whether or not you want to carry it. And then also lastly, have reasonable expectations. Don't feel like you're going to conquer some mega mountain on the first day, and be prepared to potentially turn around. Kids, it varies. So your kid might be totally on point that day. He wants to go really far. She really wants to go far. But some days you make it not even past the parking lot and you've got to turn around. That has actually happened to me. I actually have a picture in here too of that exact encounter, because yeah, it gets rough that you have all these expectations and then your kid is just not having it. So just have reasonable expectations. I don't like to say lower your expectations, just have reasonable ones. So it also varies between ages. So I like to think basically when your kid gets to be just strictly walking age, it's a little bit different. You're just going to have to kind of take their cues. But when you have babies, it's actually somewhat easier to hike, in my opinion. And it's because I think of babies a lot like potted plants, where you just basically stick them in something and they'll sit there for a little while. It's totally fine. So my kid was able to be stuck in a child carrier and I could just go on my way. And he was, I don't know, maybe 12 pounds. So it wasn't too much extra effort for me to go hiking with him when he was a little baby. When you're carrying babies, you have to start off with a soft carrier. So ones that are made by like Ergo Baby, Lily Baby. You got to look at the weight requirements depending on your kid. You can eventually go to a hard framed carrier, which is the one that you see on the right here. And that has very specific weight requirements and height requirements. And your kid also has to be able to keep their head up by themselves. My big suggestion is to go to an outdoor store where they have them in stock, and you can actually fit the child carrier to your frame and figure out which one works for you. I found that the Deuter brand, which is the one that I'm wearing in this photo here, worked best for me. I have a very petite frame. I'm 5'2". I tried Osprey and Kelty and they just didn't work for me. So I went with Deuter. Also, when you have a baby, you can work around nap time. So nap time can get real serious. And you can see in all of these photos, my kid napping just on his back. So usually what would happen is I'd leave pretty early in the morning and then we'd get to the trailhead. I'd give him a bottle, change his diaper. We'd go on our way. Once we got to our summit, whatever that is, whether or not it was a mountain or a lake or whatever it was, I'd give him a snack, another bottle, maybe change his diaper, and then he'd fall asleep on the way back, and it was great. I made my hiking pretty quiet, which was nice. Sometimes babies are quite loud on the trail, and that worked really well to kind of work around his nap time. And then there's also, this breastfed versus bottle fed babies while hiking. Breastfeeding tends to be a bit easier. I don't mean that breastfeeding can be very difficult, but when it comes to hiking on the trail, there's no really extra weight that you have to bring with you in order to feed your baby. Where bottle fed, my kid was bottle fed, and so I would always have pre-made bottles ahead of time, and I'd stick it in an insulated pouch so that it stayed warm. I'd always have powder packets just in case I needed more in a jiffy. Most of the time it was fine, but that worked really well for us. If you have toddlers, it's a whole other game. Basically, you have to be prepared to have them walk, allow them that freedom, but also be prepared that you will likely have to carry your kid. Even my kid now, who's almost 6, I will sometimes carry him. If we want to do some bigger hikes, that's the only way we can do them, is if I'm able to carry him later. So my kid basically has 2 speeds, which is really, really fast or absolutely sedentary. So he's either looking at a rock for 5 hours or he's on my back. So there's no in between. Also allow plenty of downtime. Like I said about looking at a rock for 5 hours, I'm not joking. Basically allow that time, make sure you have that time allotted in your hike, because you think a hike will take a certain amount of time, but if your kid sees something or is just wanting to hang out and play on rocks for a little while, it just takes a lot longer. So just be prepared for that. Bring all the snacks, and I mean all the snacks, everything you can think of, things that that they like, and maybe even some new fun things like M&Ms or something. And in one of those photos, my kid is drinking pink lemonade because that was his treat for the day. Also bring a really good imagination to play games on the trail. Check for wildlife tracks, which is what my kid's doing in the photo all the way to the right. There have been many times my butt has been saved just by simply hunting for dinosaurs. So yeah, just come with a really good imagination and chat with your kid about things. Also bring a change of clothes. Even if your kid's potty trained, if there is water on a trail, your kid will likely end up in it. It just happens. Case in point, my kid, we went to Diana's baths here in New Hampshire, and it was early May or mid-May. So it was cold, it wasn't super hot, but he wanted to put his feet in, so I allowed him to. I took off his pants, thankfully. But there he is slipping into the puddle there. I did not mean to take a photo of this. And then in the second photo, that's him cramming M&Ms in his mouth after he fell in, and he is basically completely bare naked underneath that raincoat because we had to dry out all of his clothes because I didn't bring a change of clothes. So, but once you kind of figure that out, then just enjoy. My kid has gone on a ton of hikes, basically because I put all of those, early steps into place. And I've gone hiking with him so much that he just gets used to being on the trail, being in the carrier, walking himself. We lived in Colorado for a while, even the first 2 years of my kid's life. So we've gone to many places there, the Maroon Bells, the largest aspen grove, Island Lake there. We've gone to Canyonlands National Park, Arches, Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, tons of places, Banff, Jasper National Parks, all over the White Mountains. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of memories on the trail, and he still talks about them, even though we don't go as often as we used to before he went into school. So, but it's also a good reminder that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Just like social media in general, it's just you're looking at someone's highlight reel. So just remember that behind every beautiful photo of a kid smiling on the trail is likely one of these photos. And the one that's on the bottom right, that's the one that we didn't even make it really past the parking lot. You can see the cars in the background. He was very upset. I don't remember why, but I did learn his triggers. Most of the time it was either because he was very hungry, or he hated the wind. So in a couple of these, the two that are the winter photos, with the snow in the background, those ones, it was very windy that day, so he was not pleased about that. And then even when they grow up, they're still not happy. The smallest thing can set them off. So there are some tips and tricks that I'm going to go over to help prevent those meltdowns. So these are tried and true methods, at least for me and my kid, for a successful hike. Number one, just like I said earlier, start early. This doesn't actually just mean in terms of life, also in time of day. We would go on a lot of trips very early in the morning so that we were at the trailhead for breakfast, which worked really well for us because then we were able to hike until about lunchtime, and then he'd be able to either fall asleep on my back after lunch, or he would be able to fall asleep in the car on the way home. So I always kind of timed it so that we were either at the summit around lunchtime or we were back at the car by lunchtime. So starting early always seemed to work for kids. Second tip is bring buddies. Just like adults, doing things with your friends is a lot more fun. It really couldn't be more true, even with kids. So kids are great incentivizers for each other. You can race to the next trailblaze. You can, make a scavenger hunt with them. And they also learn to help each other. And it's really quite sweet to watch your kids problem solve together and create sort of this different bond that you wouldn't get otherwise. So yeah, it's not only really great fun, it's just a really great place to grow and learn with your kids. I also think it's really important to allow for child-led and adult-led hikes. So what I mean by this is switch it up. So have hikes where it's strictly all about the kid. So they're the ones leading the hike. It gives them autonomy and independence. They can sit and look at a rock for 5 hours. It doesn't matter. I mean, unless obviously if it comes, with safety, but that mostly they're in charge of the hike. And then also have adult-led hikes where you set the pace, or, at least tell them we need to get to a certain point at a certain time. I usually like to tell my kid about it the day before. I kind of hype him up about it and say, his big, strong legs can get him to some amazing places. And he usually gets pretty excited about it. And it turns out to be a really great day. But I need to sort of warn him about those hikes so that he understands that there's a set time and pace for things. And then so learn the art of distraction. This can usually get rid of temper tantrums pretty quickly. I usually have binoculars on hand, which my kid loves, even though he usually uses them backwards, although in this photo, he's using them correctly. Bring like a wildlife identification card to figure out what some tracks are. Hunt for dinosaurs. So in the picture here, my kid and I were doing the Flume Gorge in New Hampshire in the wintertime. You can go up to a certain point at the Flume Gorge. And there's one that's before chasing dinosaurs, he was just not in the mood at all. And then I decided to get him distracted by chasing for some dinosaurs, and he got really excited afterward. Bringing a kid-friendly camera is always a fun thing, but you can find them for $20. Kids love it because one, it gives them sort of independence that they can do their own thing. But it's also great for leave no trace because you won't have to, pick wildflowers if they're really tempted to say pick wildflowers or take something with them. Instead, you say, oh, we'll just take a picture instead. And, that way everything just stays where it is on the trail. A couple of apps that are sort of my go-to. One is Seek by iNaturalist, which will do plant ID. It also works offline, which is great. And then Merlin Bird ID, which is great. You can actually record birds singing, and it will help you figure out what the bird is, because more than likely you'll actually hear a bird before you see it. And even the app All Trails is fun for kids. My kid likes to look at where we are on the map a lot for some reason. A huge one is to bring incentives. So our go-to are mini M&Ms, and I give my kid 3 mini M&Ms every time he makes it to a trailblaze before I do, which keeps him going on the trail. And usually we have, Summit lollipops or gummy bears. The photo on the right is actually my friend Jenny, who is a huge outdoors woman. She lives in Utah, but this is a Minecraft sword that she hid up a mountain. And her kid did Mount Olympus, which is a huge mountain. I mean, I don't even think my kid would be able to do this hike, but her little dude did, and it was amazing. But it helped to have incentives. And again, bring extra clothes, specifically extra underwear. Even if your kid is potty trained, just bring it. You will thank me later. And this is the one where my kid, we went to Diana's baths. He was so excited to go in, ended up falling and totally wet, and we could not go back until it was dried out. So yeah, just a warning that this was lucky. It was a nicer day and we were able to dry out his clothes. But if it was a colder day, we would have been running back to the car, which luckily for this hike, it was only a half a mile to Diana's Baths, but it can make or break a hike. And then speaking of staying dry, you don't have to buy every type of outdoor gear for your kid, but my one piece of advice is to invest in good base layers and outerwear. Just being cold or being wet can be very hard for kids. And so making sure that they're comfortable will alleviate a lot of issues on the trail. So I swear by Rema, which is, I think, a Swedish brand, but that's their winter like snowsuit sort of thing that my kid's wearing in this photo here. I just sized up, so he's actually in his 3rd year to wear this. So they're pricey, but you get a lot of wear out of them because they're really high quality, so they last a long time. And then Rema also does base layers, and so does another company called Explore. They're also quite good with base layers. So I'm sure there's other ones out there. The key is to look for merino wool, and merino wool is a lot more expensive than other things, but will keep your kid dry and warm in the winter. And then you look for like wick away stuff for the summertime. And then lastly, my go-to thing is to bring bubbles on a hike. They're very lightweight, and whether you are a kid or an adult, bubbles can make everybody happy. I don't know what it is. It's just so much fun, and it has gotten me and my kid out of a potentially terrible situation. So yeah, everyone always laughs every time that I bring this up, but bubbles have been the go-to item for hiking with kids for me. And then just remember that things usually never go as they are planned, no matter how much you prepare. So the key is to adapt, be positive about it, because kids will feed off that energy, and don't be afraid to turn around if you need to. The mountains will always be there. You don't need to go do that summit that day. You can always turn around and come back. So yeah, it's just always a reminder I like to tell people. And then so these are some adventures that you'll find in the book. There's a whole bunch in New Hampshire. I know New Hampshire pretty well, just because I live here. The one in the top left there is the Hellcat Interpretive Trail, which is in Massachusetts. Gillette's Castle is in the middle there. That was a favorite growing up as a kid, growing up in Connecticut. But basically the point of all of these hikes is that there's usually something really fun to see that kids will really enjoy, whether or not it's a really big view or if it's Winnie the Pooh, which is my kid is totally overjoyed with being able to see Winnie the Pooh in his cave. Or, it's a cool gorge with this raised boardwalk. So yeah, the hikes range all over the place. And where you can buy the book. So I always like to tell people to go to independent bookstores. They are able to get books even if they're not in stock. They can order the book pretty easily. And independent bookstores, they are the ones who are really the heart of this business, this publishing business. So I love it when people can support the indie bookstores, but it is also available at all major booksellers like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million. Outdoor stores also will carry this, including REI, Kittery Trading Post, and then my favorite kids outdoor store, which is up in Kittery, Maine. It's called Kit Supply and Company. And then you can also buy the book for me if you'd like, and I can sign it for you when I ship it. And you can get it at my website right there, sarahlamagna.com. Pretty easy. And then I also have a couple of upcoming events, including my book launch, which is this Saturday. Weather is not looking wonderful, so we have a rain date for Sunday. But we have a family hike. There's also a happy hour happening. And then I also have an event in June with Gibson's Bookstore in Concord, New Hampshire, kind of doing a similar talk to this. So this was my first event. So you guys kind of got to be the guinea pigs for me. But yeah, so I guess I'll open up to questions if people have them.
Yeah, so folks, let's give Sarah a big virtual round of applause. Wonderful job, Sarah, especially for your first book event for this book. So if anyone has any questions, please type them into the Q&A. If you have any comments, please type them into the chat, and we can easily take, at least 10 minutes of questions here. Sarah, you touched on this at the beginning a little bit, but can you sort of emphasize for us why did you choose to write this book? How did this book come about?
Yeah, so I'm huge into getting families outside. I think the outdoors can teach a lot for both kids and adults alike. Specifically with kids, there's obviously physical benefits of just like getting your kids outside and exercising and those things. But more importantly, I really wanted people to be able to show or see how incredible nature can be for kids. They problem solve better. They learn a lot of independence. They have such autonomy. They are in better moods. I know the days that my kid is outside, he's in a better mood in the evening. And so I got really tired, I guess, of seeing a lot of people kind of holding on to their trails that they really liked. And I wanted to show, I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to show families some really great trails. Some of them are a bit off the beaten path, and maybe some that you might not have ever heard of, including the one that's actually on the cover of the book. It's an incredible hike. Not a lot of people go there, but I just want people to get outside. I think it's something, I'm a huge believer that the more people who get outside, the more stewards there will be of the land. So yeah, I think that we'll have a better, conservation by raising the next generation to get outside.
Excellent. So Michelle says she loved your presentation. It was so detailed and enough to support the timid adventurer. Michelle also does have a question though. Do you have any tips for food choices in terms of spoilage, weight, health, energy, etc.? I know you said bring lots and lots of food and
Yeah.
bring their favorites and maybe surprise them with a new treat. But
Yes.
what do you think in terms of spoilage, weight, health, and energy?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and definitely something that you have to really weigh the options, like the literal weight of what you are willing to carry. Because more than likely, even if you have a kid who's carrying his own backpack, you will end up wearing that backpack. So just be prepared for that. Definitely stuff that's high in protein and energy. So trail mix is a great option. Any sorts of granola bars that will give kids a lot of energy, that will help pretty much in most situations where kids are just lacking the energy to get up and get going. And it's not overly heavy, and also usually has M&Ms or something in it that kids will want to eat. And then I always end up having some sort of treat that we don't usually have at home. Like friends of ours have, they never allow their kids to have those pouches. So like, those applesauce pouches or the Go-Gurt pouches or whatever, but they do on the trail. My kid sucks those things back all the time. So that's not really a treat for him. But we do have like these little fruit bars. I think Costco has them maybe. Also high in energy, but I also don't have, he doesn't usually have those at home. He only has those on the trail. And then we always have treats. Like lollipops are lightweight and easy to shove into small places. So I like to have a lollipop at the end for my kid.
I could go for a lollipop and a pink lemonade
right
about now.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Rebecca asked about your website. So I put your website in the chat.
Perfect.
It's sarahlamagna.com, her name. It's spelled out in the chat. Cheryl says, great presentation. Thank you very much. Raja is giving you a round of applause in the chat. Margaret says, a very creative yet practical guide for parents. And she thanks you for the presentation. Another question, sunscreen lotion versus spray. What's best for the trail?
Honestly, so I usually have, I will spray my kid, lotion my kid prior to going, and then I carry a small one with me. For me, for my child, spray seems to be like, you have those like little travel sprays. They seem to be the best for my kid because he doesn't sit still. So the easiest way for me to get sunscreen on him is to just spray him. So it's really up to you. Lots of times we actually end up wearing clothing that is SPF something. And so a lot of times we actually don't put it on his like his body, just really his face and his neck and his hands. But usually we do long sleeves and long pants in general, just because it's good for sunscreen, but also for bugs and ticks and those sorts of things that will help prevent ticks and other things to get on him. So we usually do long sleeves, and like poison ivy, it won't be as bad if it gets on their skin. So yeah.
All right, folks, so let's give Sarah a big virtual round of applause for a wonderful presentation. I encourage folks to purchase a copy of Sarah's book from an independent bookseller, or, if you must, through Amazon. I also encourage you to encourage your local public library to purchase a copy of Sarah's book for sure. Yeah.
Oh, and Robert,
so
that's actually, that's a huge thing for authors too, is if you request through your public library, that counts for authors. So we love it when you request to your public library. So please do that.
Yes, I do know that Tewksbury, my library, did order a copy of your book.
Awesome.
I did check just before, and it's not in quite yet, but I'm sure it'll be here soon. I know the book was just released. So anyone who lives in or locally, check out the Tewksbury Library. We have a copy. So for folks watching live, look for an email tomorrow from me with the recording, the feedback survey, and information about some other virtual programming that might be of interest. And for those who are watching the recording, thanks so much, and glad you found us on YouTube and elsewhere. Sarah, any last words before we wrap it up?
Not really. I hope this will help anyone who's maybe thinking about getting out with their kids or their grandkids. There's a wide variety of trails, so you can probably find something that will fit your ability and your kids' ability. So, and then tag me on my social medias. It's just my name. So, I would love to see you out and about on the trail, and I'll share.
All right. Michelle says thank you. Pat gives you a round of applause. And Frank, I can't even count the number of emojis Frank just put in the chat. But he says, great presentation. We are agreeing with your wise philosophy. Yes. And they love Gillette's Castle. It's wonderful.
I grew up in Gillette's Castle. It was great.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you all for watching. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks so much.
Thank you.